So we're coming, to the tail end of the retreat, whether you've been here for 1 month or 2 weeks. And so, what vantage point will you stand upon from this point forward? What new perspectives or insights have culminated from the 2 weeks or 1 month? Of course, the depth of that depends on how much you kind of really looked at everything that needed to be explored. I mean, I know every long-term trip I've taken to practice with my teacher, to deepen my practice, has always had a different theme, a different lesson. Certain things gained, certain things lost, certain things needed to be let go of. And this is where that growth process takes place. It's not just, skimming the surface or analyzing things through the mind. It's like really being an active participant of all that was culminated, during the experience or throughout the experience. Of course, like in, the yoga tradition, like yoga practitioners, and I'm kind of talking not like modern, I'm just talking also like of old. It's a different breed of human being. It's a different breed. And it's, this aspect of really being able to stay open, to stay strong at the same time, to really work from a space of awareness and consciousness, to explore your fear and your resistance. I mean, I can see it too, like even in yoga, there's places, we can hide. I've seen people do it, like it's like, okay, I'm just gonna okay. So it's, there's places that you can hide. There's still facades that can be created. So sometimes we get caught up in, even in spiritual practice, even in the yoga practice, which we've discussed, we can get caught up in the external, the way things look, the way things are perceived. It takes quite a bit of courage to really, truly be raw at times and to really allow things to be shaken up, to then allow the dust to settle in a different way, to actually allow yourself to break open, to put those pieces back together, maybe in a more strong or resilient way. And sometimes in these growth periods, it does feel like, this ebb and flow of being broken open and putting that integration or those pieces back together, and being broken open and putting those pieces back together. And oftentimes, if we do it consciously, we enter into spaces, or we can grow into something where, we were even stronger than we are before. Not in a rigid way. That's not what I'm referring to. But again, also being willing to be exposed to, that's something that, the author the teacher too that I was mentioning yesterday, he talks a lot about exposure. Sometimes we want to hide and I'm always like people want to sit over here. Why not over here? You don't want to be seen? You don't want to be, sometimes we always kind of hide in the back. It's kind of interesting, and I've kind of learned to just just throw myself into spaces where I want things to be shown to me. That's why I continue to go. And I mean, I have colleagues that are, I don't need to do it anymore. I'm done. I don't need to learn anymore. I've already, it's kind of like this kind of other mind stuff, but then you kind of see what culminates after a while. So like I mentioned, even people outside of yoga who I admire, people who are doing really great things, they always tend to have, again, mentors. They always tend to have people that give them guidance or expose things to them, challenge them. I find that to be interesting, like that catalyst to like, burn through what is unnecessary. And, at the heart and soul of it, it's just like what the yoga really guides us to is nothing is going to be more fulfilling than what's inside of you, that internal space. I mean, I find it interesting, like people get so caught up in like, we can enjoy things of the external world, of course, but you'll start to see the chase and the grasping of things is so draining on your energy if you deny like kind of that internal space within you. And it's draining. And then the more drained you are from ignoring what's happening internally, then you keep grasping even more externally. And it's a never-ending chase until you actually, at some point, you'll be utterly exhausted. And I mentioned that before, like, one of my friends, she's, quite a bit older than me. So she's lived a lot of life experience, went through years and years in her young life of like, addiction and all this stuff. So really went through some heavy stuff. But, one time I was really like, trying to, again, being so naive and silly and stupid in a way, like trying to save somebody. And she was just like, well, they need to go even lower. They need to go even lower because they don't want, they're not going to listen to you. They don't see the beauty and the blessings that are right in front of them. So they got to keep sinking. And that was like really, at first it seems heartless. It seems like there's no compassion there, but that's where you also have moments of letting go, where you just have to kind of let go. And of course, at the end of the day, the one person you need to be responsible for is yourself. Not to say that you can't be of service toward others. So we always talk about this aspect of this letting go or this detachment, becoming unattached. It's a very interesting thing. It's very challenging too. Knowing when to hold on and when to let go. But a lot of times what's meant for you will come. Sometimes we grasp and we hold on to things and it takes so much control and so much energy. But again, like if we just kind of let go, if it's meant to be, it has a way of coming around. It has a way of coming towards you. The more internal work you do, you become a magnet. You magnetize what is meant for you. As you work on evolving and raising your vibration and your frequency, then you start to match things of an equal frequency, and you become a magnet. You magnetize those things. And we have to touch upon the most important thing, like the internal landscape inside of ourselves and feeling that fulfillment internally. Because, again, like I mentioned, anything from an external form we can enjoy and participate in, but I always say that's just like the icing on the cake, but it's not the cake, it's just a little bit of an extra, and it's just like, and you can still enjoy that, but the cake is in here, right? It's like, it's internal, that internal fulfillment, where I don't have to be dependent on anything of an external form to make me happy, and that's quite powerful, that's very powerful. And that is, in some schools of thought, that is how yogis are defined, is like, it's you're always in that space of equanimity and peace. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to get there. There's a lot of letting go. There's a lot of discovery. There's a lot of inner work that needs to happen. But again, nothing starts to taste sweeter. I think the glimpses of peace and profound stillness and deep love and gratitude, even the glimpses of it are so powerful. That's what keeps me going. It's just a tiny taste of it. There's nothing sweeter outside of myself than that taste, the glimpses that you get sometimes during practice, sometimes during stillness when you're in nature or with your, when you're just in this really beautiful aligned space. Nothing tastes sweeter. And that's one reason why I continue to be drawn to practicing. Because and then you start to think, wow, a small taste is so profound. Like, what is a big gulp like? I mean, I might just faint because it's so overwhelming. That's what's really interesting. And that's something that I've mentioned before. It's a recognition, like, of knowing what it's like to really be at home. Like, I mean, I can say, oh, I'm from the United States and I was raised here and this, but it's like when I started to do these practices, I started to realize, wow, this is what home is like. This is where I feel fully myself. And it's like, it's such a profound experience, but it almost brings tears to my eyes because I feel so grateful. Wow, and then I'm kind of sad the times that I didn't see it, I didn't see. And then I was suffering because I was just in, another internal space where I didn't realize the blessings that were right in front of me or the people that were championing me because I was, more invested in just, I don't know, being a victim or looking at the negative, or not letting go of certain things, when in the end, it was all there really for my own freedom and liberation. And it's happening in every moment. I really feel that the universe is very affirmative, and I feel like a lot of things do happen for our highest good. But it's just how we transform all of these challenges and how we confront these things. And sometimes we get caught up in delaying and thinking, oh yeah, tomorrow or next month, next year. And then we see ourselves doing that forever. And then all of a sudden 20 years have passed. Oh, okay, I guess I didn't embrace these moments. So this is very powerful where, again, it doesn't mean that we don't take pleasure and enjoy our relationships and enjoy, all of us enjoy different things. It can be artwork, it can be, architecture, it could be anything. I'm just like, but again, it's never as everlasting as what the yoga is pointing you towards, or the meditation, or any of these practices that take us into our internal space. And, I'm not the only one who says this. Many people say this. It is said over and over again, but we don't really fully trust it. We don't, because we want to see the result up front. We want to see the result of it. We don't really trust it. And then we keep chasing. And then 30 years pass by. We're like, what the fuck? Just wasted all this time. Chasing. In one way I feel very happy. I kind of saw it through observation, my mother was an immigrant to the United States, and she grew up in a third world existence and came to the US only with an 8th grade education. And then, of course, she fulfilled the high school level education, then got her bachelor's degree, got her master's degree, and kind of saw this kind of vision of the American dream, but it wasn't exactly what it was cracked up to be in one way, which is kind of interesting. Not to say it's wrong, because some people do go places for a better life, but I kind of saw that some things didn't match, right? Like it didn't, like you can continue to do those educations and like chase after that career, but if it's devoid of what's internal too, and the healing that you don't take a look at, then something goes off, right? Even though a lot of external things are accomplished. I really, through observation, saw how it's not always what it's cracked up to be if we don't take a look at what's happening inside of us, or if we don't heal old wounds, if we don't reconcile past grievances. It just continues to live in the present no matter what you accomplish. And, again, I can also see things from a certain vantage point of like with compassion, like how you kind of see like the suffering that it kind of generates. And what I do find interesting, I mean, and this is something you start to realize, just some of the parameters in the yoga practice. It's like, if you continue just to chase sensory pleasure, your own body becomes a prison. You start to create the prison. I mean, that's a whole thing of like, just kind of delaying gratification a bit. Do you know? Like, because then, you start to feel the heaviness and it's of your own making. Do you know? Like, that's one reason why even in the 8 limbs, we have just like these different attributes that we work through, or that pratyahara, that sense withdrawal, like to really get the fulfillment internally. Because if we keep chasing, it's like we actually create our own prison. We don't have to be behind bars for that to happen. We don't. It can be in our own minds, but also even our bodies. Like, who cares if you're the worst asana performer in the room? If you free up energy in your body, that's great, because sometimes I feel like my daily practice, if I can bend over and tie my shoes at 80, 90, great. I want to be, mobile to do to keep living and living fully. And the thing that also, and I saw this through my own observation, like, my grandmother, who again, beautiful human being, but, later in her life, she didn't really move much. Like even my whole young life, I knew her, she didn't move much. It's like, it was kind of like from the bedroom to the chair, to the dining room, to the bedroom, to the chair, to the, in front of the TV, it was kind of like, like these 3 things, which again, it's kind of like, if you don't like take care of certain things, it's like, then like it starts to limit so many things. I think that's the thing that was quite inspiring about, I really always recommend the book, very easy read about Krishnamacharya, his life and teachings, but so active, 80s, 90s, still active, cooking his own food, going to the market, still teaching, like super, super active still. So sometimes it's not only the length of your life, but it's the depth of the life that you live. That's one reason why we delay some of this sensory pleasure to kind of extend the life, extend the prana, extend the energy. And it is, what I start to really realize, like for energy, of course, we eat good food, we try to get sleep. But one thing I realize is you also are filling another tank when you meditate into the yoga practice. It's like a spiritual energy. So it's not only food that we need, it's not only sleep that we need, we also need, this etheric spiritual energy too. We need to fill that tank up as well. And that's what these practices also do. It feeds us in another way, where we're not as entranced as deeply. Even though we can enjoy it, we're not as entranced as deeply to all of these external things. Or it doesn't define us. Or, when we get it, we're happy. When it's taken away, we're still happy. I mentioned that also part of this exposure is really seeing and exploring and taking a look at some of our hang-ups, like the things that we need to like slowly let go of. And it can be challenging, a little bit like, pulling off a Band-Aid. It can be a little bit uncomfortable, but certain wounds and things at some point need fresh air, and so they can heal even further. So that Band-Aid can be good for a time being, but we can't keep it on there forever. And some defense mechanisms can be good for a time being, for survival or coping, but it's when we hold on to those coping mechanisms forever or for too long that they start to become a bit of a crutch. That's why even just in the asana practice, we try to work through certain techniques and things to evolve, to grow into new spaces. Maybe we do need a little bit of a prep, or maybe we do need a little bit of a prop or something, but then we have to kind of see if those things are working. Are they becoming crutches, or are they working? We have to see. And then that means we have to let go of them at some point to see if they are actually working. So I did, last year I went through this book, Letting Go. I mentioned it earlier, but I haven't really read anything from it. But also I'm just going to share a quote or two as well. This is also another woman that I've mentioned, Carolyn Mass, who she wrote, her most classic book is Anatomy of the Spirit. But she's a very no BS type of person too. She's very interesting if you ever hear her talk. But here she says, always go with the choice that scares you the most, because that's the one that is going to require the most from you.
Because that is the one that...
Because that's the one that is going to require the most from you. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting how sometimes your heart is pulled towards something, but we always want that validation of that confirmation. Oh, am I going to be okay? Is the net going to be there for me if I fall and stumble? Well, that's not always how the universe works, necessarily. It's an interesting experience. I've told a few stories. There's been some experiences I've had where I just kind of okay, I'm going to walk in this direction. Let's see what happens. But it's almost like that trust and that willingness and that faith. It's like all of a sudden when you do that without any certainty, you don't, you're not, you don't even have an expectation. It's like somebody comes in to kind of support you, or something comes in to help you. It's kind of interesting, which I find to be really fascinating. So this is actually somebody that comes from he was more of a, kind of like a business, this Jim Rohn. He's no longer living, but a lot of his books and quotes were even though he came from more the business world, were so kind of very energetic, in some ways spiritual, but that's what you start to realize when people go deep into anything. It's like people arrive to the same place. If anyone goes deep into anything, people just arrive at the same place. So he says, now he's not just talking about external looks here, because that's not really where he comes from, but he says to attract attractive people, you must be attractive. Mm-hmm. To attract powerful people, you must be powerful. To attract committed people, you must be committed. Instead of going to work on them, you go to work on yourself. If you become, you can attract. People have difficulty beginning a spiritual practice because they put a lot of energy into looking for the best and easiest way to get into it. We might have to change our attitude and give up looking for the best or easiest way. Actually, there is no choice. whatever approach we take, we will have to deal with what we are already. We have to look at who we are. And that's why there can be some methods out there that just kind of like take you to a long, like you can take like another avenue and just delay. But I mean, he's kind of says it quite brilliantly. We will have to deal with what we are already at some point. When you dance to your own rhythm, people may not understand you. They may even hate you. But mostly they'll wish they had the courage to do the same. Courage is risking the known for the unknown, the familiar for the unfamiliar, the comfortable for the uncomfortable, arduous pilgrimage to some unknown destination. One never knows whether one will be able to make it or not. It is a gambling. But only the gamblers know what life is. I mean, this is a quote from Victor Hugo. I mean, this is just from my own notes. I collect a lot of things and I put it in my notes, my Apple notes. Where is that? Adversity creates men, prosperity creates monsters. Has anyone ever heard that? I forgot I put this in here. That's why sometimes it can be useful. Like, I mean, again, it's not that you have to sleep on a bed of nails or something and eat glass or anything like that. But if you do have, if you acknowledge like, oh, I have a privileged life, it is good to do some challenging things though. Do you know? Like it just kind of, because we can get a little complacent, a little like, which culturally, I have found to be interesting. Like, I mean, and I don't say this in a negative way, but like living in Sweden, sometimes I see like a lot of things are taken care of, but a lot of people won't take risks. But I've been in other places where people have so much less and they're just like, they're going after it. They're taking risks because like once you've lost everything, who cares? I'm like, might as well go for it, Like it's an interesting psychology. But you would think if you did have things taken care of that you would take the risk. But that doesn't seem to happen. And I don't know what the psychology is around that exactly, but I find it fascinating. I find it absolutely fascinating. I don't know why that is exactly. But even when I, used to work in the corporate world, I used to work for a very big company with really good advantages and what do you call it? Perks? Benefits? And it's funny because people in the company would kind of say, oh yeah, golden handcuffs. Mm-hmm. It's like, they're made out of gold, but they're handcuffs still. Like just, it kind of keeps you like in that wheel. Well, when I heard that, I was a little bit freaked out. I was like, how do I get out of here? Because I had never heard that before. I was like, oh God, that doesn't sound good. Better to have a big goal and achieve half of it than to have no goal and achieve all of it. Ouch. That's like, okay. Okay, so this is from Pema Chodron. Generally speaking, we regard discomfort in any form as bad news. But for practitioners or spiritual warriors, people who have a certain hunger to know what is true, feelings like disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, resentment, anger, jealousy, and fear, instead of being bad news, are actually very clear moments that teach us where it is that we're holding back. They teach us to perk up and lean in when we feel we'd rather collapse and back away. They're like messengers that show us with terrifying clarity exactly where we are stuck. This very moment is the perfect teacher, and lucky for us, it's with us wherever we are. I mean, Pema Chodron's really good. And it's always how we look at things, which I always find interesting because, of course, it sometimes depends on the culture, but sometimes we look at certain emotions as negative and others as positive, but all of it is just a messenger. And if we look at it with different eyes, then it's not as intimidating. It's not such a bad thing. We can learn from it and we can see like, oh, there's something that's disturbing me internally that needs clarification, that needs to be looked at. It means that I'm stuck. And if I look at it, I can become unstuck, which is a good thing. And this is another book I've quoted in the past. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Is it The Buddhist in San Quentin? It's about this man wrongfully accused. He's in San Quentin and he took up the Buddhist practice, Jarvis Masters. And then he wrote, he became a writer and he started practicing and become so dedicated to the Buddhist practice that he actually inspired certain people in the Buddhist community to come visit him. And he became, Pema Chodron became a mentor of his, and she visits him. And there's just a saying in this book that I read about his life, where he told her, he was like, I've been feeling down, so I let my practice slide. And she told him, maybe you're feeling down because you let your practice slide. Mm-hmm. Again, it's about we got to do these things to kind of build up that resiliency, and also, even though it can be challenging, to just build a reserve of positive energy, to keep our minds in good health, not only our bodies, not only our spirits, Most people carry that pain around inside them their whole lives until they kill the pain by other means, or until it kills them. But you, my friends, you found another way, a way to use the pain, to burn it as fuel for light and warmth. You have learned to break the world that has tried to break you. And then lastly, this is Picasso. He was an interesting guy. I'm always doing things I can't do. That's how I get to do them. You never know. So again, even in the practice, when you're offered, certain instruction, you've got to start to align to that as best you can. And try to work on these certain tendencies. So, I've seen it enough. I've observed it. I've observed it in my own practice. I've seen it in others. Sometimes when we take shortcuts, it's really a long one. Okay. If you start really working up front where that resistance is, then you're really going to go miles and leaps, But if you start to work on it up front instead of later, right? So short, it's a way that some people teach. They think throwing more asanas at people is going to help do the job. Not necessarily. So that's one reason why this step-by-step fashion can be really good. Again, we're not looking for perfection. Okay, we're just looking for some sthira sukha, some steadiness. Really trying to leave no stone unturned, in a sense. But this is not really promoted in some of our modern culture. And in yoga, it's a bad sign if someone says hack. Okay, just go in the other direction. That already, it's a bad sign. This is a hack to get you, already, I'm okay, no. A lot of times it's the daily, uncovering. It's the daily, right? Usually these quick fixes are it's just cosmetics. Okay, it's not the real thing necessarily. And then, again, it's just having that understanding, to build a practice that will last. Usually things of quality take a bit of time. Just a bit, not forever, You know, I'm not saying that we have to delay for, I'm just saying it just takes a bit of time. That craftsmanship, right? There is something beautiful about someone who is a craftsman, do you know? Like, who's taken time to create something. It's true, like when we buy something where someone was like, who designed it and created it was a craftsman, it tends to last longer, no?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes shirts from H&M last a while. Maybe at best a year or two, but sometimes they disintegrate after one wash. So, and sometimes it's the best we can do. Like, you know, like we're on a budget, we need like, but again, you know, you invest a little, you save your money a little bit for something and it tends to last longer, right? So, I mean, that's just a very superficial metaphor, but again, building things to last.